Welcome, friends. My name is Silas Ollegario, and I'm the host of Think Onward, a podcast about books, studies, productivity, and lifestyle now, after the intro. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Think Onward. I'm very happy and excited about this podcast and the future that you and I hold together, hopefully. And just because I mentioned something about the future, I want to say something before I actually continue with this episode. And if you're listening to this on March the 3rd, which is the day I'm launching this episode, we are still living in pandemic. 2020 was horrible, but 2021 has not been so much better yet. Some countries have developed the vaccines and are vaccinating the population. It still have a long way to go, but now in Brazil, it wasn't a federal decision, but most governors decided for it. We're back in lockdown, and that means everybody has to stay at home. Only essential things are open. And that's very sad. After 1 year, you think that people learn their lessons. People think I would think that people would, oh my God, wearing a mask and social distancing, it's important. But we are actually seeing the opposite. People still think that COVID is nothing. I tend to see people acting like nothing has happened, because maybe they haven't lost someone they know, someone they knew, or someone from their families. And that is just sad, because as mankind, we should be able to connect to other people, understanding what they go through. And even after millions of people have died, we're still not doing what's necessary. We're still thinking that COVID is just gonna go away without doing anything, and that's definitely not how it works. So it's very saddening to me, personally, but I think if people, the ones who are doing their parts, if they continue to do it, soon we will have enough people vaccinated, and then life can go back to being more normal. But anyway, today I want to go back to the topic of talking about books and about productivity and about these things that actually bring us joy. But enough sadness, enough of these things. Let's go talk about nice stuff. Today we'll be talking about the first book I read this year, Mahatma Gandhi, A Life from Beginning to End. Yes. If you are a Kindle reader or an Amazon website bookstore frequent visitor, you've probably seen this thing before. It's called Hourly History. Hourly History is this website where online books are available 100% free, and most, if not all of them, are available through Kindle Unlimited. The idea is great. Concise books, history books that can be read in 1 hour. So many different titles, concise books, incredibly easy to read, and full of quotes from the personalities. I'd like to start by one of Gandhi's famous quotes. I'm going to read here. Yes. I must say that, beyond occasionally exposing me to laughter, my constitutional shyness has been no disadvantage whatsoever. In fact, I can see that, on the contrary, it has been all to my advantage. My hesitancy in speech, which was once an annoyance, is now a pleasure. Its greatest benefit has been that it has taught me the economy of words. I have naturally formed the habit of restraining my thoughts, and I can now give myself the certificate that a thoughtless word hardly ever escapes my tongue or pen. I do not recollect ever having had to regret anything in my speech or writing. Wow. Although it's an amazing quote, it is kind of weird citing it on a podcast we're talking is basically what we do here. But nonetheless, such quote summarizes what can be expected from a leader and mentor to so many, like Mohandas K. Gandhi. Yes, Mohandas K. Gandhi was the actual name of the worldwide known Mahatma. Mahatma is a Sanskrit word which means a great soul. It was a title given to Gandhi probably by the poet and Nobel Prize laureate Rabindranath Tagore. I hope I mentioned his name right. Who wrote in 1915 Gandhi's biography. As Gandhi's political influence had grown, his spiritual reputation had also matured. He was admired for his simple way of living. His reliance on prayer, meditation, and fasting won him the title of Mahatma. These are nice and interesting facts, but if you are not familiar with his story, you might wonder why is Gandhi so respected and well known, even mentioned in important speeches by even more important leaders around the world. Mahatma Gandhi was a lawyer born in India who studied in England, lived decades in South Africa, and was assassinated in India. I don't intend to summarize any book throughout this podcast, but comment and maybe point out things that were impressive while I was reading. I believe that more than a strong leader who decided early on in his life not to act or react through violence, which sounds impressive, Gandhi was someone who fought violenceless, to freedom. And while reading history books, we learn how India was for so long dominated and explored by the British. Gandhi and his behavior were important in the way Indians finally got their freedom from the British. Another famous quote from Mahatma stands: an earthquake, a sort of general upheaval on the political plane. The government ceases to function. The police stations, the courts, offices, etc., all cease to be government property and shall be taken charge of by the people. Well, on January 18th, is celebrated in the U.S. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. We will talk about Dr. King someday, obviously. But just so you know how important Mahatma is to our history as civilization, in the 1950s and 1960s, in segregated America, Martin Luther King Jr. called upon the lessons of nonviolent protest to bring civil rights reform for the nation's African Americans. Toward the end of the 20th century, Nelson Mandela, another amazing icon in our very recent history, heeded the Mahatma's call for nonviolence to put a stop to the apartheid rule that which had kept black-skinned South Africans subjugated as a second-class race for so long. I state that Gandhi had known firsthand while he lived in South Africa. Mahatma Gandhi was considered the father of the 20th century in terms of peaceful protests. Now, there's another side to Gandhi's story, one that is not pretty and is actually shameful, a dark side, if you will. History also shows that Gandhi might have been a racist, pedophile, and involved in some polemic matters with the Nazis. Some historians claim that Gandhi was racist against black South Africans, and that in more than one occasion said that Indians were actually superior to black Africans. There's a letter Gandhi wrote to the Natal Parliament, one of the provinces in South Africa, saying that it wouldn't be fair for his people having to share prison cells or even hospital beds with black African. Ouch, Gandhi. If that is not bad enough, Gandhi had another issue with his personal and sexual life. He decided after decades to practice celibacy. He was still married though, but the reports from people who participated in Gandhi's religious services say that he liked testing his celibacy strength. How? By laying down in bed naked with naked younger or much younger women or girls. Uh, as a personal note, I like to add, for me, it doesn't matter how long ago it was, how was the culture in that country back then. Some things are wrong in my view, and the problem when idolizing these people is always the same. We usually forget they were men and women with lots of problems and eventually terrible personalities or even worse practices. Just because one leader preached the non-violence kind of protest, he shouldn't be admired as more than a leader. Uh, Treating him as an example of life to be followed always sound extremely exaggerated to me. Uh, Another thing that bothers me personally is that Gandhi never preached against the Indian system of caste. So when other leaders use Gandhi's teachings as an example in their speeches, I find it a little weird, you know. Anyhow, India for the Hindus and Pakistan for the Muslims. That was the fight. That was the how things were solved. Although he did preach about the non-violence, this whole separation that officially occurred in 1947 was extremely violent. It also led to his assassination in 1948. It wasn't Hindu who killed him because some of them didn't find it that fair, you know, that Muslims took a part of India. That's how they put it. Well, it is definitely an interesting book, an interesting story, a real story from a real leader. I usually recommend the reading of books like this one. And I also recommend the visit to ourlyhistory.com, where so many incredible men and women are portrayed in concise books. Definitely a great way to understand and learn more about our history is reading about the ones who made our history. And that's it for today's episode. I know it was a shorter version of this podcast, but it was actually on purpose. When I'm talking to myself, no, that's not right. When I'm talking by myself, I prefer to keep it short. I know you guys are listening, but the lack of interaction is very different when we have a guest, as we're going to have a guest next week, and we're going to talk for a longer time. So I just want to have those minutes in the bank with you guys. But hopefully you're gonna have an amazing week of reading, of studying, of being productive, and hopefully you're still getting value out of this podcast. I'm enjoying so much being part of this project. And anyway, I hope you have an amazing week and catch you guys again next week. Bye.